Good morning, class, and welcome to this week. This week, we're going to be talking about social status and families, sex and gender, race and ethnicity, and social class. You're going to start to realize that this textbook likes to pretty much lump a lot of different material into one itty bitty little chapter, right? But it kind of makes sense because, again, it's not an intro to social class where an intro we take these topics actually on an individual basis, on a weekly basis, right? So for family and marriage, again, it's very vital that we learn this, but unfortunately, it's all in one take, right? So we're going to start with the sociological imagination. This sounds very whimsical, doesn't it, right? Even the picture that I put of the girl with the little clouds and thinking, what's going on in her mind, right? So the sociological imagination describes the ability to think yourself away from the familiar routines of everyday life and then look at them from an entirely new perspective. So a lot of the time, right, we are set in our own ways of thinking of something, of doing it a certain way, and it's very difficult, especially as adults, to let that go and see it in an entirely new way, right? For example, politics, right? Religious, finances. These are three heavy topics that they're usually like big no-nos to talk about with people, because if you want to stay friends with them or, cordial with one another, you just don't go there, right? But what would happen if you really took the time and you sat there and you're like, you know what? I understand the way I think in my own beliefs, but let me look at from that person's perspective. Maybe they have an insight to something that I never thought of before. Another example that I like to bring into my face-to-face classes is bringing in the idea of drinking coffee or drinking tea, right? There's so many different reasons that a person would drink tea, for example, right? I have a cup of tea right here as we speak because I've been recording the videos and my throat is very sore. So one meaning of me drinking this cup of tea is to soothe my throat, right? More as a remedy, right? For sore throat. Now, to someone else, maybe that's all they drink tea for, right? If you don't feel well, you drink a cup of tea. But what if tea was also somewhere where you meet someone? Say, for example, you go to Starbucks or you go to Pete's or Coffee Bean, right? And you are socializing with someone and you're drinking a cup of tea. Now that meaning is changing because I'm not drinking my tea anymore because of me having a sore throat. It's now becoming a new perspective in the terms of, in the way that we're drinking tea to socialize, right? It's a gathering. It brings us together because maybe we don't want tea, maybe we want coffee, right? So again, it's this whole idea of looking at our everyday life in a whole different way. Now, that leads us to agents of socialization. Sounds very James Bondish, doesn't it, right? But what agents of socialization are pretty much taking into account that there's certain different groups, certain different types of people that pretty much play a vital role in why we are the way we are. So for example, your family, right? One of the examples I gave in another class was when you're little, everything and anything that your parents tell you or whoever's raising you, you're going to believe. Because you trust them, because you know that they want the best for you. You don't know anyone else besides them, right? Again, when we're little, we talk about stranger danger. We're not going to go up to a stranger and start asking them, excuse me, how do I tie my shoes? Excuse me, what is the political agenda right now with the current, presidential election, right? Chances are, again, whoever is at home with us, who's ever around us the most, we're going to soak up what they say. So one of the things I like to say is, if you're a parent, you might want to approach your child, if you've been talking about the election, for example, and then ask them, say, like, so what candidate? Who do you think is going to win presidency? And then 9 times out of 10, They're going to be your little mini me and repeat almost every word that they've ever heard you talk about that particular candidate, right? Because again, they're soaking in what they see, what they hear from you. Your peers, as you grow older and you're a teenager, you despise your parents, right? They're no longer cool. When they're little, you're all about your parents. You're all about everyone who's bringing you up. But then you grow up and then you're like, no, don't want to talk to you. You're old. Don't care. You don't know what I'm going through, right? And then you go to your peers. Majority of the time, they don't even know what they're talking about, right? And then you get misguided information, and that leads us into a whole different topic, right? Our school, we're there on a daily basis. My kids are in school. They're in school from like 8:15 until 3 o'clock, right? So you figure they're receiving socialization there at school, right? They're at school because they're learning the rules. Raise your hand when you have a question. You just don't blurt out, you stand in line, right? All the different rules. Mass media has a funny way of telling us what to think and how to act. Always like to go back to the Old Spice commercials, right? Where the guy is on this horse on the sand. Someone watching that commercial may think like, you know what? I really want to, I want to get a date with that person. I'm going to put on Old Spice. Maybe I'll find myself attractive. It worked for the guy in the commercial, right? The Herbal Essence commercial where the lady is having a great time in the shower and she's moaning and groaning and your mentality goes into a whole dirty way of thinking, right, of what she's doing. Camera spans to her and she's washing her hair because how amazing her Herbal Essence shampoo is. But what can that put in someone's, thought of mind? Oh, I'm going to really feel good about myself if I buy that shampoo, right? Religion plays a very big role in socializing us in terms of who we are when we grow up. If you're taught to live by these different norms, traditions, values, for example, in Catholicism, we have the 10 Commandments, right? You follow those. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. That is leading us towards these different agents of socialization, of learning the social norms. What is right, what is wrong, right? I have placed there's two different clips on 60 Minutes in terms of children in poverty, and I will go a little bit into this during discussion this week. You're going to notice that a lot of children live in poverty. When we think of poverty, we always think of adults, right? Because we think they're the ones that have to make a living, right? And bring home money because children cannot work because of children laws, right? It's against the law for children to work. So, when we think of children going through poverty, we really don't think about it. So the two clips you're going to see is families that live in hotels that are near Disney World. And when we think of Disney World, we think of Mickey Mouse, and we think of Minnie, and we think of this wonderful place that people go on vacation, right? But we don't think of those families, those hotels that have families living in them because they cannot not afford to live anywhere else, right? So very, very important in terms of this week's chapter. Now, social stratification is the ranking of persons in groups in a hierarchy of unequal social positions. So as we know, by the different theorists that we've learned, functionalist theories would say that it's like a Lego effect. If you're building these blocks and then one Lego does not fit, there's no functionality to that, right? Domino effect. If one is hit, everything else is going to fall. Everyone has their function for what they were meant to do. Conflict theory is going to say completely different, that no, all of these systems are leading to injustices, inequalities, competitions within their own groups. Now, social class is based on one's relationship to the means of production, so the owner or the worker. Our socioeconomic status is measured using indicators such as education, prestige, income, right? Another means of socioeconomic studies was who you know, where you live, what schools you come from. A lot of people would say it has to do with your age, your ethnicity, your race, your gender, right? In determining, are you lower class? Are you middle class? Are you upper middle class? Are you high class? many people have said that there's lines blurred, right? That there is no such thing as the middle class after the 2007 recession. Now, the significance of socioeconomic studies, according to the textbook, is that structures opportunities and power, it shapes cultural beliefs and values, it determines the availability of economic, human, social, and cultural capital, right? So the more higher you are in socioeconomic status, the more likely, that you're going to have prestige, you're going to have respect, you're going to have money, you're going to have readily available all these resources that maybe someone that does not have money would, right? Um, as we continue through the chapter, it gives a little bit of information regarding wealthy families versus working families. What do they have in common? What do they not have in common? Measuring poverty. Poverty was actually put in place as a guideline for programs that were administered in order to help children. Again, it comes down to the children because children are our future, right? So programs such as WIC, programs such as welfare, EBT cards, again, goes back to the basics of a program gearing towards children having healthy foods, to be healthy, to be nourished there. They can go to school, they can perform their best, they can do well in school, etc. The feminization of poverty. We're going to learn that women are more likely to be living in poverty, to have government assistance rather than a male. Now, the reason this is because, as we know, say for example, we have a husband and a wife, and the husband is the breadwinner and goes to work. The wife, say for example, is a stay-at-home mom, and she may not have worked for a while, or if she does, maybe it's part-time, let's just say, right? Well, say for example, something would happen to that marriage. They either divorce, they separate, there's a death, etc., right? Well, the male, chances are, is going to do well on their own because they were already working. They already had a stable job. The stay-at-home mom, on the other hand, is not going to be going through the same experience because, say, for example, they did not go to school because they had children. Therefore, they're more likely to find a job that is entry wage and is not going to be sufficient to take care of herself and children, right? So therefore, they're more likely to turn to government assistance for help. Now, the next slide is going to bring you to gender pay inequality. And here what it's going to do is it's going to take that, disparity between, is there really gender pay inequality? And you're going to notice the videos are pretty much aligning in terms of, well, it's not that there's just an inequality. There's reasons as to why there is an inequality. So take a look. That's where your sociological imagination is going to come in, right? Because maybe you're used to seeing gender pay inequality in one way. The video presents it in a different way, and then you're like, oh, whoa, right? So think about that at home. I just read the word home. Think about that as you watch that. One of the topics that I always love to bring in is the focus is always on stay-at-home mothers. How about stay-at-home fathers? Now, in the past, it was always been very, very taboo for a father to stay at home because of the label, because of the stereotype that we have that it's the father that should be the breadwinner and not the mother, right? But in fact, as you're going to notice, we're starting to see that it's becoming a little bit more socially acceptable for a father to be a stay-at-home dad than it was in the past. We saw the shift actually again happen after the recession in 2007, where it was the father that lost their job, and then it was the mother, the wife, that then had to go into the workforce to support the family. So a little bit of difference, in how we think of stay-at-home dads. When we think of single mothers, we always assume, right, when we think of single parents, in order to be single moms. How about the single dads, right? So here's a clip that I always like to show in class in terms of saying how many households in the U.S. are headed by a single father. And you'd be surprised. From there, you're going to talk a little bit about TANF programs in terms of welfare and reform. Again, what are the reasons that we have government assistance available? That brings us into social mobility. You're going to notice that it's very rare for someone to come from nothing to all of a sudden make it to making a lot of money. The examples that I always bring in is Bill Gates, J.K. Rowling. They came from poverty. J.K. Rowling was in fact in government assistance, living in London, living in her van with her children, and she started writing the Harry Potter series for her children. Little did we know, right? First time she submitted a manuscript because a friend said, this is pretty awesome stuff. It got turned down, and the publisher's like, there's no way that would ever make it big. They must be upset with themselves, right? So little did we know. But again, according to our statistics, and you'll see in the book, social mobility to move up the ladder is actually pretty slim compared to how many we see going up and then coming down that ladder, right? Gender stratification, you always have to remember that sex is with the body parts that we were born with. So males are born with anatomical parts of a penis. Females are born with the anatomical part of a vagina. Now gender is different because this is socially constructed. We as a society have socially constructed what the distinction is between males and being females, right? We have constructed that boys wear certain colors, blues, right? Whereas girls wear certain colors, pink. This week in discussion, I'm going to bring in why we associate blue with boys and pink with girls, when in fact it was actually the other way around for many years, right? So very, very important in terms of gender identities, in terms of the gender roles that we fulfill, right? Let's see. Gender inequality, that goes back to earlier, those two videos that I had showed you. And then race and ethnic variations. This one I think is one of my favorites to talk about, because you begin to think, well, what does race and ethnicity have to do with family and marriage? Well, it has a lot to do with family and marriage, right? Again, depending on who's raising us, we're being taught certain things about certain races and ethnicities. When you walk by a person of, a certain look of what they look like, skin color, the way they're dressed, if you're a female and you have a purse, clutch it a little bit closer than you would, right? Whereas, if it's someone else, then, you don't have to worry about it. You can leave your car, wherever, and then you know that nothing's going to happen, right? So again, we start constructing these different norms, these different ideas of how to treat different people. Now, you're going to notice, right, that in this week's discussion, I posted videos on different television shows. I think the majority of them are on ABC, actually, right? And I ask you, if this was the first time you're watching this type of family with this race and ethnicity, what would your reactions be? And I'm not going to give you guys the answers right now because you guys are starting to write on that discussion, right? But again, it seems like we're kind of obsessed at times with where a person comes from. One of the videos I like to show is what kind of Asian are you? I think it illustrates perfectly, right? Sometimes it's obsession of trying to figure out where someone is, because again, chances are once we see okay, they're of this race, they're of this ethnicity, okay, they're gonna like X, Y, and Z. Gabriel Iglesias, the Mexican, I'm forgetting, he is oh my goodness, you guys, can you believe it? I got the word entertainer, right? Comedian, that's it, right? Gabriel Iglesias is a Mexican comedian, and he says that there's been so many times where he has been presented with all Mexican desserts, all types of Mexican foods, all types of anything that is affiliated with being Mexican. And he's like, okay, you guys, I also like pizza, and I also like a bunch of other foods, right? Just in the way where we start to stereotype that, Asians, for example, really like sushi or rice and noodles, right? Where you could also say again, Mexicans prefer to eat tacos and beans. Where where blacks prefer to have watermelon and fried chicken. I had a student one time in class tell me, I don't even like fried chicken, let alone like even Kool-Aid, for example, right? But again, these are the stereotypes that we hear, and then we perpetuate it to be reality, right? And that's what gets us into trouble, right? So from there, again, make sure that you do look at the various clips that I show for the different types of families. And then notice again, like, what do they have in common? What similarities do they have? Okay. Now, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. There is no news reflection this week. I did send out an announcement regarding some pointers for your discussion as well as your news reflection. Make sure you guys read that, and then email me if you guys have any questions, okay? Enjoy the last day of the month, right? And I'll see you guys next week. Bye bye.